Hello and welcome to the Community Voice. I'm Fara Sax. Yes, Dr. Wendy Oliver Pyatt is back with me again for another wonderful episode and learning more about eating disorders. She is the founder and the chief executive officer at Galen Hope, an eating disorder and mental health facility located right here in lovely Coral Gables. Thank you so much for joining me today again, Wendy.
So appreciate being here. Appreciate your interest in this important subject. Thank you.
And it really is, we can help just whoever's watching. If they have a family member themselves or a community, then we've really done our job and created a mission accomplished.
That's my hope, is just making treatment accessible, making exceptional treatment accessible to as many people as we can.
And you come from a wide variety. The staff is amazing. I mean, you have
yes.
so many years of experience at Galen Hope.
Oh my goodness, I could not be more blessed by the team that we have at Galen Hope. Many of the members of our team have worked together for 10, almost 15 years in other treatment settings that I was a co-founder of. So when we put Galen Hope together, so many of the people that had worked together came back together and wanted to join forces again. And it really was a huge blessing to me and also to Amy Boyers to have those people that helped really put the stake in the ground for Galen Hope. Some people with tremendous compassion, tremendous passion, and a tremendous fund of knowledge.
And Dr. Amy Boyers and you go back many, many years in different settings. And so that wealth of knowledge is just bringing it to a community that so desperately needs it. And, and having this resource, it's a blessing. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for giving us the opportunity to share about our work.
Talk about what mental illness or health issues, conditions that you deal with at Galen Hope, so our audience can reach out and if they need more information.
Thank you so much for asking. I think many people who know me know of me as a provider of eating disorder treatment. However, my first love in my professional career has always been community psychiatry in general and working with all forms of mental illness struggles. So, post-pandemic, there's been such an uprise of individuals with mental health and also addiction issues, and it's something that we at Galen Hope are very well prepared to handle. And it can be anything from depression, major depression. It can be trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, or it can be other forms of trauma that are not so blatant. But there's something now called complex PTSD, which is a type of trauma that doesn't involve something blatant like a car accident, but it's more like the type of trauma that the pandemic was, which was just this pervasive feeling of lost control and disconnect and isolation. That was traumatic for people as well. So for trauma, certainly obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder and mood disorders, individuals who have interpersonal struggles, which we sometimes call personality disorders, although I don't really like that label. I don't like any of these labels all that much. And just individuals that are struggling with ADHD or developmental spectrum conditions where they may have difficult times forming psychosocial connections, such as in the autism world. Sometimes it's called Asperger's. There's different names and labels for these conditions, but for individuals who are struggling making psychosocial connections, we work really well with that population.
And how old is the population?
Well, we have kind of different pathways depending on the individual. We have a pathway for adolescents, so that we go down to 12 or 13 years old, but that we have a sort of adolescent program and then an adult program as well. We've treated some of our patients up to 50s and 60s, and we even have a 70-year-old patient potentially coming in as well.
Interesting. And let's get back to the eating disorder element of this and weight and stigma and the social media and the print media of beautiful, glamorous. This is what's going on. I mean, isn't it okay to love the body that we're in?
Yes.
And accept that body? But, what's going on that you're seeing in your practice?
Well, I mean, back in the days, my very first treatment center in Nevada in the early 2000s, I really actually thought maybe things would get better in our society. And I was really hoping, one of my hopes was like, it would just be great for there not to be a need for this kind of program, because an eating disorder is a condition where the person might kind of seem like they're okay on the outside, but really, really miserable on the inside. And that's very different than a lot of the other mental health conditions that we see manifest, or even addictions, where it's really obvious more on the outside that somebody's struggling. Maybe they have an issue with self-care or disorganized speech and behavior, or the addiction starts to cause changes in behavior and social functioning, whereas a person with an eating disorder can be kind of, quote, high functioning, but really, really very, very miserable. And I think one of the most significant things that's affecting all of us is diet culture that we live in. And that diet culture has been kind of getting more and more and more intense. And now that we have access to cell phones and media that's coming at us like 24/7, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or the different kind of social influence that are affecting all of us, it's that constant bombardment with the messages that, like, who you are, like what your body is and who you are is like not acceptable. And that is a really a very pernicious force entering into our mind through social media and media in general. That idea that who you actually are and what your natural condition is like unacceptable. Just the very idea that who we are and the way we are is not acceptable is a very, very, that's a traumatic event in and of itself.
But you can have a family with children, and maybe one has the eating disorder element or the mental health issue.
Right.
Even being exposed to all of this bombardment, and the rest of the kids are okay. What's going on with that one child or that one adult that kicks this? Or how does that happen? Is there something in the brain? Is it? How does this all happen?
Well,
I know it's a $1 million question.
It
if
is,
we could bottle it, it would all be rich. But
Sure.
where does this come from?
Well, I think it's impossible to really know for sure why one person ends up having a struggle, one sibling does and one sibling doesn't. There's no way to really know that. But as we talked about in the other show, genetics loads the gun, and the environment pulls the trigger. And the environment's pulling the trigger, on all of us 24/7, that, the diet culture, dieting, losing weight is thought of as an indice of health, which is not actually the case. So health is not measured by BMI. That is just a crazy notion.
It's interesting. Say that again. That's a very interesting point, because that used to be the yardstick.
Right.
To measure.
BMI is a lot of bull crap, basically. BMI is something that really just measures your bones, your water, your muscle density. And so if you happen to be, for example, certain cultures have greater muscle density leaning toward that, so they may have a higher BMI. It has absolutely nothing to do with their health whatsoever. You have elite athletes that have, quote unquote, I don't use the O word all the way, but they have O according to BMI charts. So we just have to move past these overly simplistic quote guidelines that are really pathologizing people who are really living in healthy bodies.
Yeah, and how it affects the everything that is the person, the whole person.
Absolutely.
It comes to the weight and there's been a lot said about mindful eating and how do people, young people, old people, people that are struggling, get from the point of wherever they are to that mindful eating and knowing your body.
Yes, thank you for asking that. So in diet culture, it's really about teaching external control, that you have to have a diet, something outside of yourself telling you what to eat, whether it's the South Beach diet or the Mediterranean diet or Sugar Busters or Weight Watchers, where you're actually counting, your points and things of that nature. That's sort of like an external locus of control. I think if there was space aliens looking at us, they would think, what a crazy world these people have concocted. They can send somebody off to the moon, but they don't know how to feed themselves, and they're keeping track of their eating by counting points. So that's all external to us. Somebody else is telling you or me what to eat by looking at this diet. Think of all the diets that are out there. It's really a $1 billion industry to tell people that, the way they are is wrong, and that they actually lack the ability to properly nourish themselves based on their own internal compass.
Have we shut down? Have we shut down to listen to that little voice that goes, feed me. I'm hungry. I'm
Yeah.
frustrated. No,
Yeah.
I'm bored. No,
Yeah.
I'm anxious.
Yeah.
Like, how do you tune into that voice?
Well, yeah, and then you asked about mindful eating, and I appreciate that you did. So mindful eating is something that, because of our society being so confusing, and because our society is really set up in a way that we're somewhat distracted at all times with so many different incoming media at us, television, drive up, restaurants, Uber Eats, everything that just, we're doing so many things all at the same time that it's hard to actually be a mindful eater because we're not set up for that. So mindful eating starts off with really like the idea that we do have to be deliberate about it when we're first learning about it, because our society sort of confuses us and makes it not necessarily easy.
And it's not intuitive. It becomes non-intuitive.
Well, it becomes so scattered because we're told that we can't be a mindful eater and we have to follow diet. So that's the first step, is to recognize, like, you know what, that's kind of baloney. I actually have a hardwired, biologically preordained kind of set point as far as my weight, and I have this beautiful orchestra of neurotransmitters and hormones within my mind, and a mind-gut connection that's going to guide me to when I need to eat, when I don't need to eat. So mindful eating, in a sense, is about being connected to yourself, so your mind-body experience. And oddly enough, it's really kind of about also timing eating, that learning to eat when you actually do need to eat. And recognizing that there's going to always be the need to eat every few hours, right? So we do need to eat and it's really opening up to give permission to eat. You do have full permission to eat. The point about it is like eating according to your physiological needs. And that really requires that connection between mind and body. So people with eating disorders, or even disordered eating, or what we call normative discontent.
What is that?
Normative discontent is a very important concept. So it's the normalization of food and body preoccupation that we see in our society, where you go to, a cocktail party, a Halloween party, New Year's Eve party, you get together with your friends, you're having breakfast with your friends, and it's the topic of conversation is weight loss. And it just pervades our culture, and it becomes really the mode of connection, almost talking about weight and thinking about weight loss and one diet after another. So that's the normative discontent idea. The grocery store aisle sort of says it all about our level of confusion, where on the left side, you've got all the magazines with the airbrush model, the liposuctioned images before you that are literally intruding into your psyche and keep bringing about a feeling that who you are and what you are is unacceptable. You have that on your left, and then on your right, you have the all the candy and the soda and just all kinds of easy access to food. And you're literally in the aisle, and you're struggling with, what do you do? How do you integrate all of this into a place where you can have a peaceful relationship with your mind and your body? And that's what mindful eating is about. It's about connecting to ourselves, and step by step learning to. Mindful eating is also about taking yourself seriously and taking your needs seriously, whether it's your need to eat or your need to, when you're ready to stop eating, when you've actually physiologically had enough food. And when we're connected to ourselves while we're eating, we slow down eating, and then we stop eating when we're satiated. Because if we keep eating once we're satiating, it doesn't really feel good. So
is this some of the stuff that you're teaching at Galen?
Yeah.
To people that are coming to see you as
with
patient,
eating disorders, yeah.
Disordered eating, or
yes,
eating disorder.
Yes, and many of the patients that come to us that actually don't come to us with an eating disorder do have struggles around nourishing their body and self-care in general. So we find that many of the folks that have other mental health struggles benefit from learning more about mindful eating and mindful movement as well.
That's wonderful. It's great. It's great. And that and knowing that you could have health at every size.
Yes.
You can just love the body you're in. It doesn't. So maybe
Right.
we can address that a little bit.
Sure. So there's a concept called health at every size that I'm not the creator of, and there's some wonderful human beings from decades ago that were developing these principles that are now getting more talked about. And the idea is that we can focus on healthy behavior and taking good care of ourselves, regardless of what our size is. We need to recognize that being in a smaller body or a thinner body does not equate with health. In fact, some of the studies show that being, quote, overweight, unquote, are associated with longer lifespan than being, quote, underweight or low BMI. So, or even normal BMI for that matter. That's just another another point of why the BMI is just so meaningless.
Because I remember in college, I mean, I took a health class.
Oh, goodness.
That's a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
And I went on my BMI, and they were like, no, no, no. And I was like, why?
Yeah.
But I guess in those days, that was the yardstick.
Well,
that
it
was the
still
measurement.
is. It is still
but
a
it doesn't
yardstick.
make it right.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it right. So steer clear of those health classes that test your BMI.
If I could even begin to tell you how many patients that I have treated for the past 20 years who were triggered tremendously by health class, whether it was tracking calories or a preoccupation with weight or the public shaming of being weighed in public or having somebody who's not educated about eating disorders and disordered eating talking with them about weight. It is a terrible thing that's happening. And the schools weighing our kids is really an intrusion into a person's developing person's personal space and personal autonomy.
For maybe someone that's watching in the school system that are teachers, educators, what would you tell them at this point? I mean, it starts with one person can create that village. What would you, knowing what you've known over the years, that you can address this with the school system?
Whew. Well, first of all,
I'm going to just breathe deep.
Breathe deep. I mean,
Ms.
first
Wendy.
of all, the schools have no place weighing children. It's absurd. It's wrong. Weighing children is something that needs to be done really thoughtfully, and if there's a reason to do so, it should be done only by somebody who understands the psychology of eating and the risks associated with weighing. All of us. So getting weighed is like, for some people, it's absolutely nonchalant. It means it doesn't really matter.
It's not a relationship that they have with the scale.
Yeah, it's not going to be upsetting. But younger and younger kids have very concrete thinking, and they're being weighed and sort of being told you're right, wrong, good, bad, and they can really just take off with that. And what that really leads to is shame. So if we feel that what we are is not acceptable in some way, shape, or form, especially if we're vulnerable in some ways, which could be an adult that could be more vulnerable, but certainly children can be more vulnerable. If we are led to believe by schools or doctors or parents or social systems that who we actually are fundamentally is not okay or too much, that induces shame. That's a shame-inducing process. And then that is the nidus for all kinds of like problematic behaviors, whether they're with food or depression or otherwise, because shame is a very poisonous and toxic emotion that people tend to then bury because it's so painful. So they even can bury shame with food or addiction or other responses because it's just such a painful emotional experience.
Now we're moving forward on this. Your background and Amy's background, Dr. Amy Boyers, it's really translated. Let's get back to Galen Hope and
Sure.
and how that happened and creating Galen Hope for our community, really giving hope.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I will thank you for mentioning the word hope. Hope is in the name of Galen Hope for a very intentional
And it's interesting,
reason.
yeah, because you said that a couple of times. I said, there must be something to this. Let's find out.
Well, thank you. Yes. So hope is a really special word. My very first treatment center was called Center for Hope at the Sierras in Reno, Nevada. And luckily, Amy liked the use of the word when we came up with Galen Hope.
Well, good thing. Otherwise, it would have been a deal breaker.
Oh, she was all on board with that. So hope is really special because hope is what gives us the energy to do the work. So some of the work that people are doing that are struggling with the mental health problems. First of all, a mental health problem is not a choice. An eating disorder is not a choice. An eating disorder is not somebody just trying to be vain or, just kind of get attention or be in control. This is some of the things you hear about with eating disorders.
Definitely, those are myths.
Very much so. And then also for a person struggling with a mental health condition, that's not something people can just snap their finger and change. And I do want to also mention these mental health conditions affect both men and women. So men have a tendency to feel they need to be tough, they shouldn't be vulnerable, they shouldn't express their needs when it comes to emotional needs. So men also have mental health issues. And so the reason hope is so important is that hope is what gives us the energy to do the work. So whether it's an eating disorder or a mental health condition, when people are going to treatment, they're actually doing work. Work is mental or physical energy directed toward a goal. So people aren't just going off to treatment and sitting around and, going to a spa. And it's really emotional work that we're doing. So it's sometimes painful. It's addressing painful emotions. It's expressing complicated feelings. And it's something that takes time and energy and commitment. So hope is really like the rocket fuel to do the work. You have to do the work, but if you don't have hope, what's going to make you do the work? So even if somebody has very low hope, I'll hold the hope initially as well. So if somebody comes to Galen Hope and says, I don't have any hope, I'll say, you know what, I'm going to have the hope for you for now. Aww. And maybe over some time in our relationship, you'll start to feel some of the hope that I have for you. I'm hoping that you'll have that experience of some of the hope that I'm going to hold for you right now. But it gives people that ability. We all need hope. We all need some sense of like, if I do X, Y is going to happen. And I think more and more people are feeling more lost and misguided in how to put together a life that really means a lot. There's so much pressure to perform in certain ways. There's misguided ideas that, only if you go to college can you be successful, or only if you, look a certain way can you be successful. And people need to have a sense that they can be on a path that feels true to their soul and have hope and meaning in their life.
And Galen Hope really supports that, because you hold the patient and you also hold the family and community.
Yeah, so that's where the other piece of this concept of hope comes in, is that it's not just about the person coming to our treatment center and being in a center and then feeling a certain way or behaving a certain way or getting certain benefits out of treatment in that controlled setting. The real sweet spot is helping people translate the benefits of treatment back into their life. And that's where over my 20 years of experience, I've seen that time and time again, where people don't have the recipe, if you will, to go from treatment to back into the community. And I think one of the things we were talking about pre-show is those people that have been in and out of treatment and they feel like they've failed treatment, when in fact I think treatment has failed them. Because if we don't really put in place and bake into the treatment that step down process, that community integration process, then people really, it's really kind of crazy for us to think that somebody can just go away to treatment and be in a residential setting and then plop them back in their community where they're separated from the treatment team they worked with, the cohort or the other patients that they were around. They were also protected from some of the stressors out there. They were really in a pro-recovery environment. Then they're plopped back into the community, which is not really a pro-healing environment necessarily, with much less support, and the team that was around them is no longer present.
And absolutely, because they've changed.
Yeah.
They've changed. So how do they go from Galen Hope to the world? And it's wonderful that you're supporting it with their community that are in their hub, and how they manage and how they maneuver back in as a newer person or with more insight into themselves.
Yeah, so a big piece of what we do is, instead of just the person coming to us at Galen Hope as they're stepping down, we actually go into the community with the patients that we're working with, whether it's doing something in the community with them like a dance class, or helping them get registered in school, or having them participate in a volunteer activity.
So these are partners that partners from Galen Hope that go with the stepping out, so to speak.
It could be anybody from the treatment team, but it certainly can be our care partners. It could be Monica going into the home with somebody and helping them learn how to cook in their own kitchen and with their family. She tells a story of a mom of one of our patients who really didn't like to cook that much, and we really wanted to make the cooking and the meal prep a fun family experience. So going into the home and cooking the food that people culturally, sometimes being able to like help people get excited about food from their culture and bring that into it and get excited and have fun with the food in their
Comfort
home.
food.
Yeah, comfort food or whatever it may be. I mean, I happen to love Indian food, so certainly having
Yum, let's
somebody
go right afterwards.
But yeah, absolutely. So doing things with individuals in their environment and in creating a pro recovery, pro healing pathway in their community, not just in our little world that we're creating at treatment centers.
And what's the importance of completion of treatment? And let's talk about like what does that symbolize? What does that mean?
Sure.
And you can take it from here.
Oh boy, that's a good question.
I'm sure you're going to give me a great
Oh,
answer.
I'll try. I think one of the things that is the hardest thing to do is to say, you know what, I'm going to take time for myself and I'm going to kind of press pause on all these pressures and demands in my life. And by the way, life is not a race, and most of the stuff that you feel like you need to do now, you probably could do it next year, even in some of the most hairy situations. Usually you can do some of those things later on.
But we're programmed, we're wired that
Yeah.
it's now, and we have to get
Yes.
it done now because we're
And it's a race.
and we're an immediate gratification
Right.
race. And
Right.
the-
Yes.
Stop.
Right. So, yes.
All right, I'm done.
Yeah. Treatment completion. So basically, treatment completion means that we're allowing our body and our mind and our soul to heal and to take the time and to deal with the uncertainty of that. So sometimes families will call and say, well, how long is my loved one going to be in treatment? And I say, I would be lying if I say, oh, I really know, how long somebody's going to be in treatment. Now that I know people can get a tremendous benefit from, 6 weeks of treatment. You can get a tremendous benefit. Will that necessarily bring you to a place of major stability? Maybe yes, maybe no, because it really depends on the individual, their circumstance, their condition, and their psychosocial environment that they're returning to. But treatment completion really is about going through those processes. It's really, healing is a developmental process. It's just like growing up. Is you crawl, you walk, you run, you dance.
Takes time.
Right? So it's a developmental process. Things are happening in your brain. I have never had somebody in all my years tell me they stayed in treatment too long, ever. No matter how long they ever stayed. They never said, gosh, Wendy, I stayed there too long. Has never happened. So allowing people to take those steps and to, what I always say, one of my principles is that before we reduce a support that we have at a particular level of care, we always want to see that at the next level of care, the next lower level of care, the person can kind of function in that way. It's really just like if you were teaching your child or someone you love to drive a car. You would get in the car with them, you would drive with them, you would see how they would drive, and you would test it out a little while. But you probably wouldn't tell your 16-year-old to go get their driver's license and just start driving after just, you wouldn't just hand them the keys and say, go get your driver's license or go take your test. You would drive with them and drive with them and drive with them a little more. You might, give them a little chance to drive alone in the parking lot. Then they might,
So there's stepping stones to
it's
this.
stepping stones, and it's really something that is missed. It's almost like, also one of the things that we see with some of our patients is that families, and I love our families. I'm a mom too, by the way. So our families sometimes think it's a race for our kids as well, and don't want to acknowledge that our child might need support. And so I try to remind them that if they'll say, oh, my kid has to go to school, or they have to do this and they have to do that, which is good. We want them to do all those wonderful things in life, but it's sort of like, would you let a toddler go ride their bike out in the street? And when somebody has a mental health problem, or an eating disorder, and they're just sent off to school or put into these situations where they're actually overwhelmed and it's dangerous, you probably wouldn't do that as a parent. And so treatment completion is really about going through that developmental process and allowing your body and your mind and your soul to heal in ways where you have the autonomy to manage the complex world in which we live with more and more independence.
Wonderful. And we're coming to the end of our next show here, but what do you want to leave with to our audience about Galen Hope? Last thoughts, and if they need further assistance, you can always call at 866-445-2163, or they can be contacted through their website at www.galenhope.com.
I think what I just wanted to say to the audience is that mental health struggles and eating disorders are truly painful conditions that do warrant help. Just like if you had a medical condition, if you had asthma, or if you had diabetes, or if you broke a bone, you would get the help that you need. And it's really, we really want people to understand that mental health is a part of health. And at Galen Hope, we care about your mental health and your well-being because it's really a quality of life issue. Like you said, we have one chance in this world to live the life that we want to live, and it's really about people being able to be just the most joyful and at peace versions of themselves. And sometimes taking that time for yourself, whether it's 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever the case may be, to just devote to yourself. We can really help you create a pathway towards that meaningful, peaceful life, and that's what gives me a lot of joy. And if you call us, you'll leave a message and get a call back from Chloe or Erica, our loving intake folks. And if we're not the right place for you, we will also help you find a good place.
And I want to thank you, Dr. Wendy Oliva Pyatt, and to Dr. Amy Boyers for really being there, for being the visionary to Galen Hope. And you don't know how many lives you're going to save until it's right in front of you. So I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, thank you.
And if you need more information, again, galenhope.com, or they can be contacted at 866-445-2168. They're located right in the heart of beautiful Coral Gables. And thank you. Thank you for all you do for the community.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the whole organization here. You do a wonderful thing for the community as well.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm Fara Sax, and this has been the Community Voice. Take care of yourselves and each other.